All right, so we can see on this screenshot here, right, we have a couple of moving averages. So the trend direction filter is this EMA50 above or below the EMA200, right? So if the 50 is above the 200, then, we're looking for longs only. And of course, if the 50 is below, the 200, then we're looking for shorts. And price must be above the 50. So for a long, right, price must be above the 50. And then, we're looking for price when price basically is touching or near the 50 EMA. Problem is, it just says price must reach, +5 to -5 ticks. Thing is, we don't know what price is. Which price? Is it the closing price? Is it the low of the bar or the high of the bar? That kind of information we don't know. So, I'm just going to use, I guess, the closing price. We'll just use the closing price of the bar for this. So we want to detect when the closing price of the bar gets, within, 5 ticks above or 5 ticks below the moving average, right? In this case, the EMA50. And then, so once price gets, within this 5 tick range, or once the closing price gets within the 5 tick range of our moving average, then we need to find, here we go. So the signal must be confirmed on the next candle. Right. So obviously we need the next bar to close in the direction of the trend. Right. So again, the direction of the trend is determined by the EMA50 and EMA200. Right. So in other words, right. So here is where price touches, and actually according to these rules here, I would say this image is completely wrong, because this bar, this red bar, to me it looks like this red bar definitely is within 5 ticks of our moving average, and then this next bar here is an up bar. So the signal would be on this green up bar according to this written documentation here. Right. So, so guys, when you send in screenshots, make sure it correlates with what you have written here. So, all right, so the signal is actually going to occur on the green bar there. So all we're looking for is just a signal, or the signal is confirmed, on the next candle, which just needs to close in the right direction. So this red candle basically gets within our 5 ticks of this moving average, and then the green bar, right, that's the first, well, actually this is the next bar, right, that's pointed in an up direction, in the right direction for the signal. So that's going to be the signal bar, actually. All right, so that's what we're building. All right, so we've got some kind of a name here to work with. And so let's we'll start working on some of the easier ones here, right? So so condition number 1, fairly easy, right, is the EMA50 above or below the EMA200. So that's just a straight comparison solver right here. Grab a comparison solver. And so we're going to compare the EMA50 to the EMA200. Pretty straightforward. All right, so input A, that'll be our EMA50. There we go. Put in the 50 period. So there's our EMA50. And for input B, that'll be our EMA200. Like so. All right. So there we have it, right? The brighter red is the 50, darker red's the 200. So there we go. We can see when they cross each other, right? Our trend direction switches from long to short. Okay, next thing is we're looking, yeah, we need price to be above the EMA. Again, price is very generic, which price. Every bar has 4 prices. So I'll kind of go the extra step here, and we'll assume that if we're in a short trend, that we're referring to the bar high, right? The high needs to be below the 50, or if we're in an uptrend, the low of the bar needs to be above the 50, right? So that's another comparison solver. We're going to compare the bar high or low. Actually, I should say it the other way. We're going to compare the bar low or high to the EMA50. Right? So we're going to compare the low price when it's a long trend and the high price when it's a short trend, right, to the EMA50. So our input A, that's price, right, the bar price. So again, if it's a long, we want to look at the low price of the bar. And if it's a short, we're going to look at the high price of the bar. Right? And we're comparing it to the EMA50. Right, there we have it. So as long as the low is above the EMA50, right, we have a long output. And if that low, if the high goes below the 50, right, we're going to have a short output. And so now we can actually start combining things together. So I can take the trend filter and combine it, right, with the bar high or low condition. Right, there we go. So there we have it. So we can see here, right, we're in an uptrend, right? The 50 is above the 200, but right, the bars, the bars are basically below the 50. Okay, so there's that. All right, so now the detection of price getting within, this plus or minus 5-tick range. And again, so in this case, I'm going to use the closing price of the bar. So once again, we're going to use a comparison solver. So let's grab another comparison solver. All right, so there's some kind of a name for our solver, right? So we're checking to see if the closing price of the bar, gets within plus or minus 5 ticks of our EMA50. All right, so input A, that's going to be the closing price. Now, we want to know if it gets within 5 ticks, right? So for our difference, we're going to set that to 5 ticks. And then input B, that's going to be our EMA50. Let's grab that EMA again and set it to a 50 period. Now, the outputs here, right? So far, we haven't had to change the outputs, for these other comparison solvers, right? We're just using the default. But this time, right, I'm going to turn them all off, right? But what we're looking for is when A equals B within this 5-tick range, right? So this is the output that we're wanting to use, the one in the middle here, like so, right? And there we go. There we have it. So now we can identify whenever the closing price gets within 5 ticks above or 5 ticks below of our moving average. Right. So what happens, right, is first of all, right, we need price, to be above our moving average if we're in an uptrend. And then now sometimes, if we look at this, sometimes we can see, right, that the close of the bar will be within our 5 tick range. I think it will. Let's take a look. Does it? Yeah. All right, cool. So here we go. The closing price of these bars are within 5 ticks of our moving average, right? So yeah, here's a good illustration, right? So for 2 of these bars, right, the low is above the EMA50, but on this third bar here, this is a great example where the low actually penetrates through the EMA50, right? And there's no output coming from our little filter here. So so what could have happened is when that let's look at let's take this bar here for example. What would happen if this wick had broken through the EMA50, right? Well, there would be no output here, right? There would be no long filter output here, right? It would be, right, it'd be blank like that one. So sometimes we might need to take this, basically this kind of trend filter here, and extend it for an extra bar, just in the situations like this where the wick might break through our EMA50, and then the closing price gets within that 5 tick range. So what we're gonna do is use let's see, I could use the signal extender or the look back node, and I'll just grab the look back node. Here. And with the look back node, we don't want the displacement. No, instead of the look back node, I'm actually going to use it because of this specific situation. I'm going to use the signal extender instead. And the reason why is, just hypothetically, you never know what the market's going to do. But hypothetically, when this trend reverses direction, right, we no longer want to extend, we no longer want to extend, right, this long kind of condition, this long permissive into the chart, or we don't want to extend these long permissives past this crossover point, right? And so this signal extender will do that for us. Let's see if I can show an example here. Yeah, there we go. Bingo. Oh, yeah, there we go. I grabbed the wrong reset and put opposite signal. There we go. Okay. That's what we want. So with the signal extender, right, I can use one of these resets here. And the one I'm using is this input opposite signal, input opposite signal, right? So let's take a look, what's going into the signal extender, right? Well, we have, come on, grab that arrow, there we go. So we have this long signal here, and the signal extender, it's extending it for 50 bars, and I put it to 50 bars just to exaggerate, why I'm using the signal extender, right? So this 50 bars is just an exaggeration. And then, right, when we get to the crossover, right, clearly we can see, right, we have a bunch of short outputs, right, a bunch of short outputs. And so the thing about the signal extender is, right, so we can take this long signal and extend it for 50 bars, but as soon as it hits, right, a short signal, right, the signal extender, again, right here, the signal extender turns off the long output, right? This long output will not go past this crossover point. And actually, to do this better, you know what? I need to set it up this way. I actually need to take the crossover condition there, right? So remember, this comparison solver is telling us if the 50 is above or below the 200. So I'm actually going to use this as, let's see, let me pull it down here. I'm going to use this to actually reset the signal extender. So this is actually a little better situation here. So if I open up the resets, I'm going to use the reset opposite signal. There we go. Reset opposite signal. Right? So previously I was using input opposite signal, but it's going to be better if I actually use, this 50 above or below the 200, signal here to reset the signal counter. So, so if we look at the signal counter now, right, we've taken this long signal here, and there's probably some long signals back here too. Yeah, here we go. Here's some long signals back here. Obviously there's far less than 50 bars between all this, right? So let me, let's maybe knock this down a little bit. Yeah, there we go, 20 bars. All right, knock it down to 20, right? So, just to kind of exaggerate why I'm using the signal extender is because, let's say we get this permission, right, to take a possible, to generate a possible long signal, but then immediately we get the moving averages crossing over each other, right? So that crossing over, should invalidate, any kind of a long signal there. So with the signal extender, I can use the resets here, and I can use our comparison solver, of the 50 to the 200 to turn off the signal extender, right? That's what the resets are doing, is they're turning off any kind of extending of a signal. So, all right. But, all we need to use the signal extender for is really, I think, just 1 bar. Actually, who knows? Maybe 2 bars. Yeah, let's just do 2 bars just in case. Yeah, let's go back to this little scenario back here that we were using earlier, right? Maybe, like what, for example, maybe we had 2 bars where they had a long wick, right, touching our EMA50, but but within these two bars, the closing price did not get close enough, right? So maybe we might get 2 bars before the closing price gets close enough to our moving average, right? All right, so we've taken condition 1 and 2 and then extended them an extra 2 bars forward just in case price doesn't want to work with us. Price gives us some kind of weird situation. So it might take 2 extra bars for condition 3 to occur, right? So, and all right, I'm actually going to number these nodes as well. Sometimes, all it takes is one node all it takes is one node to to identify a condition. And so if that's the situation, then then you can number the nodes with the condition here. So condition number 1, well, that's this node right here, this comparison solver. So I can just name it number 1. And then condition number 2, right, that's this node up here, so I can number it number 2. So that way, just kind of helps you refer back and forth. So this is number 3. There. All right, so now we can combine basically condition 1 and 2. There we go. So we got condition 1 and 2, combine it with number 3. And there. All right, so now the next part. Well, all right, so we don't have a condition number for this next part here. Yeah, but we need to confirm, or I should say the signal is not confirmed until we get a bar closing, in the direction of the trend. So that is pretty straightforward. So in this situation, we're just gonna simply use there's a couple of ways that we could do this. So I'm just kind of thinking to myself, which is easier and which is more, which has better advantages. Yeah, I guess I'll just kind of stick with the method I'm using right now. Again, what I'm considering is, this, oddball situation where, what do we do when, when our trend filter crosses directions? How do we handle a possible, setup where, price is up here and it looks like we might get a long bounce, but then the trend direction reverses? I'm sure that might happen every once in a while. So I just want to make sure that this, this EMA trend direction is always adhered to. There's a couple ways I can do that, right? Basically, this guy here, is telling us the direction that we're allowed to have trade signals, right? So I can use this to either reset signal extenders, and or I could also connect it in to these AND nodes, right? I can use this as a filter in these AND nodes, as well. Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm just going to stick with using this, resetting the signal extender. All right, there we go. That looks a little better, a little easier to read. Okay, so with number 3, right, we might have a possible setup, and so then the next part is to wait for that, candle pointing in the right direction. So we need to take basically, the price touch. So yeah, we can name this here. There we go. All right, so this is basically the close near the moving average. And so we need to take that and shift it forward onto the next bar, right? So if that closing price does get near our moving average, as we have over here, all right? So when that closing price gets close enough to our moving average, now we just need to wait for, the bar to reverse direction. And so we need to take this signal and shift it forward onto the next bar that hopefully is going to be pointing, in the right direction, hopefully pointing up. So the signal extender, we just need to extend for 1 bar. And again, we're going to use the reset opposite signal. Right, so we have a reset connection going in here. Right, so if this reset, right, so again, if this, trend filter reverses directions, it's going to turn off our signal extender. And now we need a bar direction. So we need a bar direction. With a AND node. Actually, you know what? Yeah, now that I look at this logic here, yeah, this signal extender is overkill. Yeah, that's overkill. So let's just use something a lot simpler. Let's just use a lookback node. And let's see, a displacement. No, we don't want to use a displacement, but we do need a lookback period of 2. And we're going to use the mode minimum. Let's see. Nope, sorry. Max. Yeah, we're going to use the mode max. And now we can take our MA, trend filter, and our bar direction. And there we have it. All right, let's see if we actually have any signals here anywhere. Oh, great. There we go. We actually have somewhere to work with. Yeah, there we go. All right, so yeah, we can see that the close of these bars, yeah, look like they're right within 5 ticks of our moving average, and then we finally get an up bar. Right. So yeah, let me take a look at the written directions here. Okay, so here, checking the conditions again here. So we do have a critical condition here. So, right, it says that basically the closing price can cross the EMA50 for up to a maximum of 5 ticks. Right? So, what do we do if it goes beyond that? My guess is that probably invalidates the signal there if it breaks beyond that. Yeah. And something else that's pretty common to this type of setup is that the close of the bar must be above your moving average, right? So we can see here that, you know, this close is not above that moving average yet, right? Usually that's required. Doesn't say that here, so we'll just ignore that for now, because maybe that's not the case. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm looking at condition number 4. You know that. So this is what we're skipping because this is subjective. You know, there's no clear logic as to what exactly that means. You know, what does, only valid if it occurs during a change in trend. What exactly does that mean? That's one of those subjective things about trading, right? So we're skipping number 4, and let's move on to number 5 here. So only one signal should be generated, in each trend direction, or for each, moving average crossover. There's only going to be one signal per trend direction. Yeah, this trend lasted a pretty long time, but we want to make sure that there's only one long signal, right, this entire time, right? So the 50 crosses above, and it stays above all the way here, all the way to this little circle here that I put earlier, right? So we want to make sure that there's only one long signal occurs here. And this, I guess things just happen to work out that way. Let's see. Let's take a look at what happened here. Yeah, it looks like we might have a setup there, right? That looks pretty close. So let's take a closer look here. All right, so what we're looking at, right, is we're looking at condition number 1 and 2, right, which is the 50 is above the 200 and the low price is above the 50. And so now this third condition, so here's what happened. Yeah, so basically the close of the bar never got within range of that EMA50 here. Yeah, so maybe, for some people, they may want to include the low of the bar, right? These kind of bounce trades are pretty tricky, right? Because sometimes it's just the wick comes down, and gets close enough to our moving average, and sometimes the close of the bar does. So let's say if you want to include the wick of the bar, let's see. I think all that's going to require is just a simple modification here. So we can zoom in right here, right? Number 3, which is looking at the closing price. So we can make another solver here. So I switched over to the solver tab. And so number 3, I'm going to make a copy of that. Right? And instead of the closing price, maybe we want to look at the low of the bar if it's a long, right? Or the high of the bar if it's a short setup. Right? And so we can then go in here and replace the closing price with the low price if it's a long setup, and if it's a short setup, then we'll use the high of the bar. All right, so we can check to see if the low or the high gets within our 5 tick range there. All right, so let's put that new solver on the board. There it is, number 3, high-low. And so these two go into an OR node. So if we look at that, right? So if we look at, this logic here, there. So now we can see, yeah, the low of the bar does get within that 5 tick range. And so that would then qualify this for, a signal there, right? So let's stretch that out a little bit. So now we can connect this together, right? So we use an OR node so that we can look for multiple prices, right? So we can look at the closing price, but also look at the bar wick, right, as well. All right, so now let's take a look at this. Yeah, there we go. All right, yeah, so during this entire kind of long setup or long trend, right, we're seeing now multiple long signals here. So we want to filter. So this last part here is making sure that we only see the first signal during this entire, long setup there, right? So there's a couple of ways we can do this. Again, there's a couple of ways. Let's see. So the easiest way can be to use a signal blocker. And yeah, so with the signal blocker, we basically would have to set the block signals for, as we can see, there's a lot of bars during this uptrend, right? So the signal blocker would have to be set really, really high. My guess, probably more than 100 bars. So, and wow, actually 100 bars is not long enough. So you see that kind of partial output there? That's telling me that the signal blocker is blocking signals when I see this little partial output, right? And that is this little output here, blocked output. So this is basically, this is like a debugger, right? So you only use this output here when you're trying to debug your signal blocker, right? So I can see how long 100 bars is, and it's clearly, man, this is like over 300 bars. So yeah, so the signal counter would need to probably block for 350 bars, right? And so there we go. That's the easy way to do it, right? So we got our first long signal during this uptrend, and all the other long signals are gone. And one other thing we'd need to do is connect, remember our little crossover trend filter. Let's connect that in there. And we can use this reset here. Oh, let's see, what's it gonna be? Reset opposite signal. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So here, let me pull your attention to this. All right. So remember this little partial output here, this 0.2 output. right? That's telling us that the signal blocker is blocking. It's actively blocking any long signals, right? So watch this area in this triangle, right? So the reset opposite signal, if I turn this on, bingo, right? The signal blocker is no longer blocking long signals because our moving averages crossed each other into a downtrend, right? And so that turned off. Right. So that's how we can reset our signal blocker. So that's the easy way to do it, right? We can see that just kind of took one node. Although, you know what? With this system, this is probably not very CPU intensive. But if you are worried about the amount of processing power, so sometimes if you start using a lot of signal blockers, that can start requiring a lot of processing powers, because you have this really long look back period, right? This 350 bars generates a look back of 350 bars. So every time one bar prints, we have to look back 350 bars in order for this signal counter, to function, to do its job. It has to look back 350 bars. Every single bar that goes by. So sometimes that can get really CPU intensive when there's a whole bunch of signal blockers with a really long blocking time, right? Now 350 bars, that's not bad with only one signal blocker. That's no problem. Piece of cake. But now I guess some people do have kind of slow CPUs, like 2 gigahertz. So, if you're running this on a whole bunch of different charts, I don't know, maybe it becomes problematic. Probably not. Running this on a 5-minute chart or a 1-minute chart, again, that's not going to be problematic. But just for the sake of learning, right? You guys are all here to learn, some new tips and tricks for BloodHound. So if you do not want to use the signal blocker, what we could do is, because we only want to see the first signal, we want to block the rest. What we could do, what I'll do is I'll disconnect the signal blocker there, so it's not being used. What we could do is I could use the toggle node to effectively do the same thing as what the signal blocker is doing. Right? Now that only works when we're blocking. This toggle node only works when we want to see the first signal during a trend. Right? So it is very limited. The toggle node cannot replace the signal blocker. The signal blocker can do a lot more than what you can do with the toggle node. But in this particular situation, it will work out. So what I need to do, I need a look back node. So this look back node, I'm using the displacement function, right? Let's see here. There. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the signal and I'm shifting it forward onto the next bar, and then I do want a way to turn off that toggle node. So again, I'm going to use our EMA50 to 200 comparison to turn off our toggle node. And one other thing. Let's see. I think the outputs, I think we need to reverse the outputs here. Yeah, that'll work here. Right. So if we look at this, right, we're looking at the toggle node. There. So we're looking at this toggle node with the output reversed. So we want to know when, well, it's kind of hard to explain without a visual. So let me do it this way, right? So what the toggle node's doing is, here, there we go. Let's mark those long signals. There we go. So there's two, right? Here's our two long signals within this uptrend. So remember our little rectangle is identifying our uptrend, right? There. We just there we go. Uptrend. There we go. Right? So there's our long signals, you know. And if we look at the toggle node, right, when that first long signal comes in, it turns the toggle node on. But in order to block our second signal here, remember, we want to block this second signal and, you know, any other signal afterwards, so the third, fourth, and fifth, and so on, right? We want to block those. So, you know, the way this is going to work, right, is we're using the toggle node as kind of a signal filter, but we're going to have to take the original signals and combine it with an AND node, right? So what we actually need is we need the toggle node to be turned off. So before we get the first signal, we actually want the toggle node on, right? So in this area, we want the toggle node on. So that's why we took the toggle node and we reversed the output, like so. Right? So we're getting an output now when the toggle node is off, right? If you read it, it says value if off. So, right, on the long side, that toggle node is off, but we would just kind of inverted that, you know, reverse that. But once that signal comes in, right, over here, the toggle node is now turned on because our first long signal came in, but we reversed it, right, to off. So now that the output is off, that will now block our extra signals here, right? Any of these extra signals get blocked because the toggle node is off, right? So the toggle node has no output going into another AND node, and that is how we can use the toggle node as a very simplistic signal blocker. Right? So there we go. So yeah, and actually I can do this. There we go. Yeah, it's not quite working. All right. So let's expand this out. Right, there we go. So yeah, if you recall, right, I think we had 4 long signals during this entire, you know, up move. So, and now we only see the first one. Yeah, so there we go. Let me get some names in here. All right, so there's the two different ways that we could block for only seeing this first signal. So we could just use the signal blocker, the easy way, or we can use this toggle node and look back node. All right, slightly more sophisticated way. All right, well, yeah, that does it for Alejandro's question. You know, we had to skip condition number 4 because I needed more kind of clarification, you know, on what this actually meant. So if we look at the screenshot here to kind of clarify, you know, this price kind of pulling back here, you know, basically this whole this whole price action before the actual touch, you know, that needs, you know, clarification in order to really kind of in order to generate clean bounce signals. You know, obviously it's easy for us to look at a chart and go, oh yeah, that's a nice clean bounce signal, but you really have to kind of define it, you know, using some logic and some conditions here in order to incorporate that in and build a proper bounce signal. So again, the the instructions for Alejandro was to I guess I got rid of it. Yeah, I got rid of it, but yeah, so my instructions were to here, yeah, there we go. So yeah, to watch this MA bounce signal here. Yeah, so to kind of understand, you know, how to define what price should be doing before the bounce. You know, that's kind of explained in these older videos here. So there's this MA bounce rejection video. That's the first one. And then the second one, the follow-up, part 2. Oh, it's right there. Sorry. Yep. So this is the first video, and then MA bounce number 2 is kind of the follow-up next week. So, yeah. So that's, yeah, so we omitted number 4 because of clarification. And if you want to learn more about that, just watch the MA bounce and the MA bounce 2 to kind of understand, you know, how to properly, you know, clarify what this number 4 is, right? Which is the, yeah, that's kind of basically the price action before the bounce. Let's see if I can find some examples. Yeah, like right here. Here's a good example. You know, I'm not sure anybody would really define this as a bounce, right? Because price has been kind of playing around, right? It's been kind of consolidating around the EMA50. So I don't think most people visually would consider this a bounce, you know. So it's kind of clarifying this price action before the bounce, you know, is what's needed. So